Imagine this. You've just finished class, and instead of rushing straight into the nearest building, like a cafe or a library, you actually have the option to stay outside for a little while. You're lying on the grass in the shade, talking with your friends, finishing an assignment, or just taking a break without feeling like the Arizona sun is draining all your energy. Or imagine walking from one class to another underneath a canopy of trees, with a breeze that makes the path feel a little more livable and a little less exhausting. That feeling of ease is what researchers call a third space, a shared environment where community forms naturally, without an agenda, without a schedule, just people in a place that welcomes them. For a university, third spaces are not optional. They are a part of what makes a campus feel alive, where friendships are made between classes, where students can decompress after a hard exam, where you run into a friend you haven't seen in weeks, and end up talking around the campus for 20 minutes without planning it. These kinds of experiences should not feel rare on a college campus, especially not at Arizona State University, where students move constantly between classes, study spaces, and social spaces. Arizona actually just recorded one of the hottest March temperatures in United States history. March, not July, not August, March. And every year, the heat arrives a little earlier and stays a little longer. As temperatures continue to rise in Arizona each year, more and more outdoor areas on campus become uncomfortable or even unusable during the hottest parts of the day. That is a problem, because shade is not just about comfort. It affects health, social life, and the way students experience campus every day. Students are not lingering outside anymore. They don't want to stop to talk. They are not sitting on the grass, or they don't want to take the scenic route to the next building. Why? It's hot outside. They calculate the shortest walk time to move as fast as possible from one air-conditioned space to the next. Everything that could have happened in between, every conversation, every connection, every moment of rest, disappears with the heat. This is not a landscaping problem. This is a student well-being crisis. This video explores how extreme heat shapes student life at ASU, why third spaces matter, and how better shade and cooling infrastructure could make the Tempe campus healthier and more usable for everyone. Once you start noticing that heat changes how people move across campus, the next question becomes, what is heat doing to the actual student experience? Third spaces are the places where students connect outside of class. They are the benches, lawns, courtyards, shaded walkways, and outdoor seating areas where people can talk, study, eat, and take a break. On a college campus, those spaces matter because they help people build community in between the structured parts of the day. When those third spaces start to disappear, something less visible also begins to happen. Students don't just lose physical places to sit or gather. They lose the opportunity for spontaneous connection. The quick hey to a classmate, the unplanned conversation on a bench, the moments of simply being around other people without pressure, those start to fade. And when those small, everyday interactions disappear, people can begin to feel even more isolated, even while being surrounded by thousands of others on campus. The environment becomes more transactional. Go to class, go inside, go home. Without the social in-between that helps students feel connected and grounded, that sense of isolation doesn't always happen all at once. It builds gradually. Students may not even realize it at first, but over time, the lack of shared outdoor spaces and casual interaction can make campus feel less welcoming and more disconnected. And that's where this starts to connect directly to mental health. Because humans rely on both social interaction and physical environment to regulate how we feel. When students are constantly navigating heat, avoiding outdoor spaces, and missing those moments of connection, It can increase feelings of stress, loneliness, and emotional fatigue. Heat also affects mental health. When people are constantly uncomfortable, dehydrated, or exhausted, it becomes harder to relax and stay present. Extreme heat can add to stress, irritability, and burnout, especially for students who are already balancing school, work, and personal responsibilities. Instead of using outdoor spaces to recharge, many students avoid them completely. And then there's the academic side. Heat can directly affect focus, motivation, and concentration. If students have to walk across campus in extreme temperatures, they may arrive in class already drained. If they are too uncomfortable to use outdoor study spaces, they lose another place where they could normally work productively. Over time, this can change how students study, how long they stay on campus, and how much energy they have left for learning. By the time students finally get into an air-conditioned building, they are often still recovering from heat. That means the classroom experience starts with exhaustion instead of readiness. So the issue is not just that ASU gets hot. It is that heat changes how students move, connect, and function on campus. And because ASU is a walkable campus, students cannot just avoid the heat completely. They have to cross it. That means the campus design itself becomes part of the problem. When there's too much sun and not enough tree cover, even short walks can become physically draining. Over time, that affects not only comfort, but also health, focus, and how likely students are to spend time outdoors at all.
Now, to understand why the Tempe campus feels so intense in the heat, we have to look at the way the campus is built. A lot of the paths students use every day are made of heat absorbing materials like asphalt and concrete. These surfaces soak up sunlight all day and then radiate that heat back into the air, increasing the surrounding air temperature by 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. This creates what is often called as an urban heat island. On a campus like ASU, that means the spaces we move through most often can become much hotter than they look. This matters because the problem is not just the air temperature, it is also the surface temperature. On hot days, asphalt can reach extremely high temperatures, averaging higher than 150 degrees Fahrenheit, while shaded concrete is significantly cooler, around 80 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That difference creates a kind of thermal barrier for students walking across campus. It is the difference between a path that feels manageable and the one that feels exhausting, especially when you are moving between classes in the middle of the day. Some parts of the campus are wide for an important reason. They allow cars, service vehicles, and emergency services to move through campus more easily. That makes sense from a planning perspective, but it's also important to remember that vehicles can take other routes and move quickly through the campus, while students are the ones walking directly through the heat and feeling its full effect. That difference matters. Students do not have the same flexibility that cars do. They cannot just turn on air conditioning while moving from class to class, and they cannot avoid the sun the same way vehicles can. That is one reason why we see students often using scooters and e bikes in walk only zones. They are trying to move faster and avoid as much heat exposure as possible. When the campus has too much open pavement and not enough shade, students end up moving from one shaded spot to another just to survive the walk. By the time they arrive at class, they are overheated and fatigued, but it goes beyond just feeling tired. Research shows that extreme heat directly affects the cognitive function. Heat affects the working memory, the brain's ability to process information, and how well students can retain what they are learning. So, even when they make it to class, they have to depend on the building's air conditioning to cool down before they can even focus, since their brains are still catching up. In many cases, it can take a long time for the body to fully recover from the heat, which means students may spend part of the class still trying to cool off instead of fully paying attention. That creates a frustrating cycle: heat outside, AC inside, and then heat again outside a little while later. This is where this research becomes important because it shows that this is not just a feeling, it is measurable. Studies on outdoor thermal comfort in Tempe have shown that shade makes a meaningful difference in how hot people feel while walking through campus. In one field study on ASU's Tempe campus, shade lowered thermal sensation by about 3 points on a 9-point scale, which is a noticeable difference in how comfortable people feel outside. Their research also found that globe temperature was the strongest predictor of shade's effect, which means direct radiant heat plays a huge role in whether a space feels unbearable or comfortable. In other words, it is not enough to only think about the air temperature. If people are standing in direct sun, the heat can still feel intense, even on days that do not seem to be that hot. There is also research on cool pavement, which shows that reflective or coated surfaces can lower pavement temperature during the day by roughly 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. But those treatments mainly affect the surface itself, not the overall experience of walking through a hot campus. They may reduce the heat on the ground, but they do not create shade, and they do not solve the problem of radiant heat bouncing back on students directly. This is why trees are such an important part of the solution. The research on ASU's pedestrian space suggests that tree shade and artificial shade are both effective in the dry heat, but trees offer added long term benefits because they improve the environment in more than one way. They cool the space, make it more walkable, and add a sense of comfort that goes beyond just blocking sunlight. In Arizona, where there are more than 50 days where the temperature reaches above 110 degrees, shade becomes a safety issue, not just a convenience. The hotter the valley gets, the more important it becomes to design outdoor areas that can actually support student life rather than pushing people indoors all the time. This is why the question is not simply how do we make our campus cooler? It is how do we make our campus livable in a way that supports students long term? The solution is not just planting trees anywhere on campus, it is being strategic about where they are placed. That is why the videos we recorded of some of the most heavily used foot traffic areas at ASU are important. They show exactly where students spend the most time walking, waiting, and moving between buildings, which makes those paths the strongest candidates for shade improvements. If ASU wants to make the campus more livable, it should start with the areas that students use the most. High traffic routes should be the first place to receive native trees, especially in locations where students currently have very little protection from the direct heat of the sun. These are the spaces where shade would have the biggest impact on daily life. That is also why more shade analysis audits are important. Audits can help identify which parts of the campus are hottest, which areas get the most foot traffic, and which routes need intervention first. Instead of guessing where shade is needed, the university should use that information to make more effective, targeted decisions. Another major advantage is that trees get bigger over time. As they grow, they provide more shade, wider canopy cover, and stronger cooling benefits. We noticed this while looking at some of the trees in front of the Memorial Union. A few years ago, Google Map images showed those same trees when they were much younger, and at that time they did not provide nearly as much shade. Now, because they have grown, their canopies cover much more space and create a much cooler, more comfortable area. That shows why this project is not just about immediate results, it is about investing in a long term solution that gets stronger over time. And because Arizona is a state where water scarcity is always a concern, the solution cannot be to plant any tree without thinking carefully. The goal is to plant native trees that are drought resistant, adapted to the climate, and capable of surviving the heat without demanding excessive water resources. That makes this approach more realistic and more sustainable in the long run. It is not about forcing a completely different environment onto the campus. It is about choosing the right trees for the right environment that already exists. By contrast, pavement coatings or cool pavement treatments may lower surface temperatures somewhat, but they do not solve the bigger problem. They may reduce heat on the pavement itself, but they do little to improve the actual student experience of walking across campus. For that reason, pavement coating should be treated as a secondary measure at best, not the main solution.
A third step is redesigning third spaces so they work better for the people who use them. That means paying attention to where students naturally gather, where they walk the most often, and which areas could become more useful if they had more shade. The goal is not to make every part of campus artificial or overbuilt. The goal is to create spaces where students can actually stay, talk, and study, and rest without being pushed indoors all the time. So when we talk about shade, we are not just talking about comfort. We are talking about a practical, climate-conscious way to make ASU more usable for students now and for students in the future. In the end, this project is really about how students experience campus every day. Heat changes the way people walk, where they spend time, how long they stay outside, and whether they can actually use the spaces meant for them. If outdoor areas are too hot to occupy, then the campus is not working as well as it should. This is why shade matters. It is not just a visual improvement or a landscaping choice. It is a part of basic infrastructure that supports student health, social life, and academic focus. Trees in the right places can make walkways more comfortable, help students spend more time outside, and reduce constant pressure to move from one air-conditioned building to the next. The footage we collected shows that some of the busiest parts of campus are also some of the most exposed. That makes them the most urgent places to improve. And the example of the Memorial Union trees shows what happens when trees are allowed to grow over time. The shade becomes larger, more effective, and more valuable for everyone using the space. At the same time, we have to be realistic about Arizona. A good solution has to respect water scarcity and the climate conditions that already exist here. That is why native drought-resistant trees are the right choice. They offer long-term shade without ignoring the environmental limits of the region. So, if ASU wants a campus that is more sustainable, more walkable, and more supportive of student life, then expanding shade through strategic tree planting is not just a nice idea. It is a necessary one.